West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Let me introduce you to two prosecutors in New York that could scare Donald Trump right now, more than anyone else. They are the ones working normally behind the scenes on the Trump Organization criminal probe. Manhattan DA Cy Vance's office will make one of the most consequential legal calls ever, and soon. It will be this year, we expect, a decision on whether to criminally charge a former president's company or even the former president himself. And to do that, he is now relying on two tough and renowned legal experts in white-collar crime. This probe's always been about following the money and dealing with secrecy, and then also looking at this enterprise as a whole. The insiders make a striking comparison.
It's all about money with Donald. And I actually went through, a situation where I was asked to literally build false financials.
He doesn't give you questions. He doesn't give you orders. He speaks in a code, much like a mobster would do.
Trump has a way of getting people to do things that he wants them to do without saying, do this.
Strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange. And I don't do it lightly.
Follow the money. If you follow the money, you will get your answers. People need to start following the money.
Those are real witnesses, real veterans of the Trump Organization in the outer orbit and other investigators. And you hear the comparisons there by those people who know, from Trump org to mafia tactics. And now we're seeing how prosecutors are scrutinizing and probing the Trump Organization the same way they have mafia organizations. So in our special report right now, we look at the evidence of this. I'm not talking about rhetoric. I'm not talking about labels. I'm talking about the actual prosecutors doing this work right now. Two very specialized hired guns that the DA has tapped for this very case, because the hires can be pretty revealing. They may shed light on what's going on inside an otherwise secret process, this special grand jury that's been impaneled in New York. So meet Mark Pomerantz, a top prosecutor who pursued mafia bosses, a specialist in white-collar crime. He led the criminal division in the famously tough and independent Southern District of New York. He's been dubbed the perfect guy for the job if there is a legal, justified way to take out Donald Trump in court. His most famous prosecution might be putting John Gotti Jr. behind bars, the notorious New York mob boss who headed the Gambino crime family after his father went to prison. Pomerantz was, despite many tries, the only prosecutor to actually get him. Gotti faced, 4 separate trials in later years, each of them ending in a mistrial.
If you go by the government, who didn't I kill? The day we're picking the jury, I says, I got to try to end this. I got to try to end this. I says, get me the plea. Get me the plea, I'll take the plea. They chased me out of that industry, but quick.
Get me a plea on day one. This is also someone who's been on the other side of mafia cases, which is pretty interesting. He defended Anthony Bruno Indelicato, a famed member of the Bonanno crime family, who was also This is why it might be ringing a bell for you. Made famous by a depiction in the movie Donnie Brasco.
This is Donnie, a friend of mine. We'll just stand there and look dangerous, friend. Oh, he does look dangerous, Donnie. Come on, Bruno.
Now, this ain't a movie. Here's what's key about the actual case. Pomerantz appealed the real-world situation, the client's conviction there, and forced courts to effectively change the legal definition of racketeering, which had been used to prosecute organized crime figures. Now, Pomerantz has defended some of New York's highest-profile defendants. He knows exactly how it looks on both sides of the table, which means he may have some idea of the kind of hardball, tough defenses that a Trump organization might try to bring out if they do potentially face indictments this year.
Sam Waxel, the former CEO of ImClone and society friend of Martha Stewart. Waxel's attorneys, Mark Pomerantz, argue that Mr. Waxel should have an easier sentence.
Anthony Chiasen, whose conviction on insider trading overturned earlier today by an appeals panel of judges.
Former New York Governor Eliot Spitzer will not face criminal charges for his role in a prostitution scandal.
New York's accidental governor, David Paterson, says the criminal probe of his activities is continuing.
So Mr. Pomerantz is someone you'd want to defend you, although right now he's not available for the Trump org because he's investigating them. He also, in that investigation, has reportedly been involved in these high-stakes Michael Cohen interviews. So that's a lie. Then the other clue. The DA has also tapped Gary Fishman as an assistant attorney general coming from New York Attorney General Letitia James' office, who's been collaborating on this very case. Now, Fishman's a veteran white-collar investigator who has done some very big cases, including aggressively pursuing evidence in these high-stakes financial crimes cases where the banks seem to have all the money in the world for their defense. But he won a $100 million mortgage fraud case, exposed a multi-million dollar charity theft, then exposed law-breaking by one of the world's largest banks, leading to a record-setting $536 million fine.
$536 million global settlement with Credit Suisse represents by far the largest sanctioned settlement in the history of the Treasury Department.
New York City prosecutors have charged 13 people with running a mortgage scam. They say the defendants bilked homeowners and banks out of more than $100 million.
William Rapfogel was arrested and accused of money laundering, grand larceny, and conspiracy. Rapfogel allegedly then pocketed the cash, more than $1 million.
Those are big legal victories. They led to a previous New York Attorney General tapping him to head the state's Criminal Enforcement and Financial Crimes Bureau. So this is the prosecutor now working to try to flip, well, someone who may or may not allegedly have been involved in financial improprieties. The money man, the CFO, Alan Weisselberg, of the Trump Organization. You take it together and you see what the DA has his eye on. Two heavyweight lawyers working on the Trump Organization criminal probe. One, an expert in organized crime, how the mafia rolls. The other, an expert in financial crime, what people do in those secret boardrooms to steal money, which affects everyone, but you might never hear about it. And most importantly to the DA, and most concerningly for the Trump Organization, these aren't just experts. As I just showed you in brief highlights, they have a track record of winning even tough cases against very tough defendants. Now, I want to say what I've told you before because we're looking at a very intriguing caseload here, but we don't know where it goes. It's always possible that even hiring aggressive and fair prosecutors, they don't think there's the evidence, and there might be no charges this year. But when a DA brings in these kind of outside legal ringers, people like Pomerantz and Fishman, it's because they think they have a strong case to make. This is something we've been reporting on, but it's also something I just want to give you a clear view here that's pretty much in the legal mainstream, because if you're just doing the ordinary cases, you don't always bring in what I'm calling the ringers. Here's how legal expert Dan Abrams put it on The Beat.
I think it's one of the least discussed decisions, and that was the hiring of Mark Pomerantz. That immediately tells me this is much more serious than the past investigation of the Trump Organization. You don't bring Pomerantz into the office full time unless you've already got a lot.
It is Wednesday, the 16th of June of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? And while we're getting rid of those meddlesome priests, how about a lovely egg dish with a velvety hollandaise sauce? Okay, looks like Joe is over there, meaning overseas, with the summit with Putin. Now, a bit of disconcerting news. I heard that the Democrats are not going to pursue the notes, secret notes, any evidence or testimony from the translators, and essentially what was secretly brokered between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. And apparently the reason for it is the Biden administration wants to look ahead, not look behind. Now, once again, I just have to say, when a crime has been committed, you have to punish that crime. You can't just let it go, especially one as severe as selling out America. I mean, if it's just some kid with a joint, I don't know. Maybe you don't want to throw him in the slammer for 20 years. Though they would do that instead of looking at how and why and what was sold when America was sold out to Vlad. The kid with the joint gets 20 years, and the conspiracy to sell out America is, well, we don't want to look back. Or something else occurred to me, is that Joe and the White House already know what was brokered, what was said, and what was promised. And they already knows, and Vlad's not getting it. So they're not going to make a big deal about it. They got bigger fish to fry, so to speak, if you can speak it. This early in the morning. Indeed. Okay. I need more coffee, don't we all? As an aside, did you hear that there is another study for the great health effects of coffee, which will be followed up with some news stories about how terrible coffee is and it's going to kill you early. I love how those competing coffee stories come out. Okay, back to Joe and Vlad. So, are we going to put Vlad on notice? What sort of sanctions will we impose? I'll say one thing that is actually heartening is that we do know that Joe is not going to sell out America to Vlad or anybody. All right? The only people who would do that are Republicans. And they have done it many, many times. Show me some Democratic people who have sold out America. Actively conspired to overthrow elections, to undermine international treaties for a raw hold on power. That's in the domain of the Republicans. Which just means that maybe they've always been Nazis. They just kidded us as being the loyal opposition. We need a two-party system. No, we don't. If the Democratic Party was the only party available, as I've said many times before, what we would have is a parliament, because there's so many factions to the Democratic Party. We make up a cross-section of all of America, not just a part of it. So I wouldn't worry about the Democratic Party running the roost. Not like we think of the party system now. The founders were against the party system. George Washington argued against it. And the argument actually showed exactly what is happening right now. And happened the last 4 years. And one could also probably surmise, conjecture, suggest that it's been happening for a lot longer, maybe even from the inception of the party system. So denazify America. We have to purge every single Nazi out of America. It's what makes us America. Nazis are anti-democratic by definition. Marjorie Taylor Greene is now furthering another one of these big lies. Oh, it was the FBI that was behind the riots. It was a counter-intel thing to make Trump look bad. And the deep state, they're behind it. It's all some psychological counter-intel psyops. Yeah. She's a Nazi. They just will not stop with their big lying, and that's why we need to purge every Nazi out of America. How do we do it and still, I don't know, recognize their constitutional rights, whatever that is? You have a constitutional right to destroy America? No, you don't. So, the DOJ and the FBI came out with some new plans about how to attend to this domestic terror threat. But they had to both sides it, of course. Of course. Though they could only cite vast amounts of evidence that incorporates pretty much just right-wing white nationalist violence perpetrated upon government and business and civilians. Hard-pressed to find that from some sort of, I don't know, Sandinista faction in America. Did the Sandinistas actually do any of the terror that was attributed to them back in the day? I don't know. But anyway, hard-pressed. How extensive is it? How deep is this Nazi takeover of America? Well, I mentioned on the Twitters that both Vindman brothers, true blue patriots, true blue, were kicked out of the service because they are true blue patriots. And yet Flynn's brother gets a promotion, still has a commission, after taking part, aiding and abetting an insurrection. Well, first you have the coup, and then it becomes an insurrection when there's electeds involved, which beggars the question. There were already electeds involved in the coup, so they jumped right into insurrection when that crowd breached the Capitol. It wasn't a coup then. The coup has been ongoing. And when electeds become involved in a coup, that is then defined as an insurrection. Guided tours, telephone calls about where the speaker is at that very moment. I would still like to know who destroyed the panic button and security box there at the door. I believe it was in AOC's office. It could have been somebody else's. I'm trying to think. But we still haven't heard about who did that. You would think that would be a serious crime. And yet, there are kids who were busted for vaping, tased, brought down, kneed in their gut. Tourists, by the way. And those kids will spend more time in jail vaping than these Capitol insurrectionists will be spending. Many of them released on their own recognizance. No one got arrested that day, or very few. They just let them go. We'll catch them later. And yet on that Ocean City boardwalk, they weren't letting anybody go. In fact, they didn't even have proof that they were vaping. They just heard that they were. It turns out just to be a bunch of black kids standing around. They must be up to no good. Let's go tase them. More of an uproar on the Ocean City boardwalk of kids vaping than there is about the Nazi takeover of America. This has to stop. Don't look back. If you don't look back, then you'll never know who is stabbing you in the back, will you? Every time we say we have to move forward, we have to go forward, we get stabbed in the back again. About time that stopped, don't you think? I do. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays? Starting off here at the top, there are 2 New York prosecutors who scare Trump more than Mueller ever did because they got the goods, and they are not constrained by how Mueller was constrained. On the rest of the menu, Kamala Harris announced the administration will disburse $1.25 billion to help small businesses. The Southern Baptist Convention stopped a push from its extreme right wing to make an issue of critical race theory by electing a new president who has worked to bridge racial divides in the church. And the Senate passed a bill that would make Juneteenth a federal holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. Just don't teach it in the schools. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where election results for a new Algeria showed the country's oldest party won the most votes. And a French court ordered Ikea to pay $1.3 million in fines and damages over a campaign to spy on union reps, employees, and some very unhappy customers across France. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link across the page is the link to our Patreon site. And if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds our way once a month, we're able to pool those funds with funds out of our own wallets and continue resisting this Nazi takeover of America. We thank you for your generosity. It has been sustaining us for 10 years, yes indeed. A whole decade of resistance radio. Because we like to think we're the powerhouse, though small we be. We are the powerhouse that did. Not just could, but did. And we're still doing it. And we thank you. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. And he and Kelly do so much more than just those 2 tasks. Thank you. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, and I suggest you do, because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and post that up on Twitter at Justice Putnam. That's me. And other social media platforms too. And it looks like in a couple of days, they say, Zuckerberg's going to allow me to come back until they decide that I've, bothered too many Nazis too many times. Wow. I thought that's what we're supposed to do as Americans. Apparently Zuckerberg's not an American. Apparently. I don't even know if he and Bezos are Earthlings. Well, we wander, don't we? Anyway, if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Yep, they're everywhere. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is from the Associated Press, but by way of the American Independent. Vice President Kamala Harris announced yesterday, Tuesday, that the Biden administration is distributing $1.25 billion to hundreds of community lenders in an effort to help boost the economic recovery from the coronavirus for small businesses and disadvantaged business owners. President Joe Biden and I knew that more than repair, we must reimagine our economy, Harris said during an event at the White House. Small businesses, of course, are at the center of this reimagining. Yeah, wait until big business finds out. They'll squash that idea while blaming the Democrats for destroying small business. Yeah, that's right. How many Democratic members are part of the Walmart board, huh? What? The funds are going to more than 860 community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, around the country. CDFIs offer loans to small businesses and those who may be turned down for loans from major banks. A problem that studies have shown particularly plague minority business owners. Harris has focused on small businesses from the start of her vice presidency and has emphasized in particular the need to support minority and female-owned small businesses as key to a robust economic recovery. Wait till a bunch of white conservative men find out. What? They're taking our business away and giving it to them, with a capital THEM. On Tuesday yesterday, she lamented that traditional banks have not always seen or understood the vision of women, small business owners of color, small business owners who serve low-income communities. CDFI, she said, add value to those communities and, by extension, to our entire nation. This fund in particular comes from work she did as a California senator. The funding for the program comes from $12 billion provided for community lenders in the 2020 stimulus that was signed into law by then President Donald Trump. My God. And that was last December. He signed it. At the time, Harris pushed to include funding for CDFIs in the final package, along with Virginia Democratic Senator Mark Warner and House Financial Services Committee Chairwoman Maxine Waters, a California Democrat, both of whom joined her at yesterday's event. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen also joined Harris at the event and said that the CDFI funding delivered on Biden and Harris's campaign trail promise to tackle systemic racism and build an economy that works for everyone. CDFIs, Yellen said, are exactly the right place to focus our attention because these questions, who can access credit and capital and who can't, those questions are at the root of many long-term structural problems in our economy. Travis Lawler and Peter Smith of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Southern Baptist Convention tamped down a push from its right at its largest meeting in decades on Tuesday yesterday, electing a new president who has worked to bridge racial divides in the church and defeating an effort to make an issue of critical race theory. Ed Litton, a pastor from Alabama, won 52% of the vote in a runoff against Mike Stone, a Georgia pastor backed by a new group called the Conservative Baptist Network that has sought to move the already conservative denomination further to the right. Yeah. Litton, who is white, was nominated by Fred Luter, the only black pastor to serve as president of the United States' largest Protestant denomination. Luter praised Litton's commitment to racial reconciliation and said he has dealt compassionately with the issue of sexual abuse within Southern Baptist Convention churches. another hot-button subject at the gathering of more than 15,000 church representatives. Of course, you know the old joke, the only reason you become a Southern Baptist minister is for the extramarital sex, but apparently that wasn't enough. Stone had campaigned aggressively, including speaking at churches across the country and even appearing on Fox and Friends on Tuesday before the vote. And the Conservative Baptist Network had encouraged supporters to come to the meeting as voting delegates or to harass people. But in the end, the message that seemed to resonate with voters was that Stone, who supported a motion to repudiate critical race theory, an academic construct for framing systemic racism that has been a target of religious and political conservatives, was a divisive choice. We are a family, and at times it seems like an incredibly dysfunctional family, Liddon said after the results were announced. But we love each other. Yeah. Delegates rejected, well, I only say that, yes, we love them. Do they love us back? And at some point, when you think about unconditional love, the whole idea of unconditional love is it doesn't matter if they love you back. But don't say just unequivocally that we just love each other. Not when you have hateful racists that will go to any lengths, even killing members in their own family, calling it a civil war because I just don't want to share. Delegates rejected a proposal that would have explicitly denounced critical race theory. Instead, they approved a consensus measure that does not mention it by name, but rejects any view that sees racism as rooted in anything other than sin. If racism is a sin, shouldn't there be a penance paid? Of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Senate passed a bill yesterday, Tuesday, that would make Juneteenth, or June 19th, a federal holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. The bill would lead to Juneteenth becoming the 12th federal holiday. It is expected to easily pass the House, which would send it to President Joe Biden for his signature. Juneteenth commemorates when the last enslaved African Americans learned they were free. Confederate soldiers surrendered in April of 1865, but word did not reach the last enslaved black people until June 19th, when Union soldiers brought the news of freedom to Galveston, Texas. Don't teach critical race theory or the 1619 Project in Texas. I wonder why. That was also about 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation freeing slaves in the southern states. They just wouldn't let you know. If you don't know, then you don't know. Making Juneteenth a federal holiday is a major step forward to recognize the wrongs of the past, said Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, but we must continue to work to ensure equal justice and fulfill the promise of the Emancipation Proclamation and our Constitution. The Senate passed the bill under a unanimous consent agreement that expedites the process for considering legislation. It takes just one senator's objection to block such agreements. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin had objected in the previous Congress to a bill to celebrate Juneteenth as a federal holiday because of the cost and lack of debate, he said. Johnson noted that he has supported resolutions recognizing the significance of Juneteenth, but he was concerned the new holiday would give federal employees another day off at a cost of about $600 million per year. While it still seems strange that having taxpayers provide federal employees paid time off is now required to celebrate the end of slavery, it is clear that there is no appetite in Congress to further discuss the matter. Therefore, I do not intend to object, Johnson whined in a statement before Tuesday's vote. All right, well, that brings us to our break. And why don't we? And when we get back from that break, of course, we will go through weather from around the world. And of course, we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, don't you love it when a plan comes together? For better or for worse, I prefer to put things in boxes. I like identifying trends and tropes, and I'm kooky for categories, so I am embarrassed to learn of a genre that has been right under my nose, of which I was previously unaware, the raunchy teen quest comedy. In the raunchy teen quest comedy, teen guys search for something. A cool party, alcohol, sex with women, one last night together, an object they've quote-unquote borrowed, which they've now lost, even White Castle hamburgers, although those guys weren't teens. In what is frequently a coming-of-age story, raunchy antics ensue. Recently, though, in a break with exclusionary tradition, women have pierced this genre's celluloid ceiling not only to make the raunchy teen quest comedy, but also to center young women as its leads. 2 years ago, Olivia Wilde gave us Booksmart, and now much undercast actor-turned-director Natalie Morales gives us Plan B. In Plan B, Kuhu Verma plays Sunny. She's 17 in a modest South Dakota town and should be studying for the PSATs, but her overprotective single mother is away for business, thus it's time for Sunny to break her good girl ways and have a party and have sex. When day breaks, Sunny finds she has mishandled her barrier method contraception. Thus, with ride-or-die best friend Lupe, played by Victoria Morales, begins a desperate quest for the morning after pill, which Sunny and Lupe find increasingly difficult to get. Raunchy antics ensue, along with heartfelt character moments, and the tonal shifts between the two were a bit abrupt for me, but they never lost me because the vibe between Verma and Morales is so strong. You just love their characters together, so much so that even though Plan B is a complete story with nothing more teased, I wonder about a sequel. And another reviewer had said the same thing. We just want to know what comes next. We want to see more stories with these characters, and we want Natalie Morales to give them to us. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Emily Mullen. In the past 20 years alone, 3 coronaviruses have caused major human disease outbreaks. First came the original SARS virus in 2002, then Middle East Respiratory Syndrome in 2012, and in 2019, SARS-CoV-2 emerged, setting off a global pandemic. Hundreds more coronaviruses are lurking in bats and other animals. Scientists have warned that some of these viruses could emerge in the future to infect people. Our current COVID-19 vaccines were specifically designed for SARS-CoV-2. But what if a next-generation vaccine could protect against both known and unknown coronaviruses? Scientists at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research in Silver Spring, Maryland, are working on a so-called universal coronavirus vaccine. Dr. Kevin Majerad is leading the effort.
We've developed a vaccine specifically for SARS-CoV-2, but what we've seen in our animal studies is that the immune response that it induces is active against all the variants as well as other coronaviruses like SARS-CoV-1 that was seen back in 2002.
Before COVID-19, Majority and his Army colleague Gordon Joyce were trying to develop a universal vaccine against a different group of viruses, one that includes Lassa virus, which is similar to Ebola.
And so when the new coronavirus was identified as a coronavirus and the sequence was published January 10th of 2020, that night, Dr. Joyce and I had a late-night conversation about turning or pivoting our work that had been ongoing for other viruses towards this coronaviruses and towards coronaviruses as a whole.
Their vaccine is known as a spike ferritin nanoparticle, or SPFN for short. It combines tiny particles from a blood protein called ferritin with coronavirus spike proteins. All coronaviruses have these spike proteins on their surface. The vaccine works by presenting the immune system with the spike protein over and over again in an ordered fashion. But making the vaccine wasn't as simple as attaching one protein to another. Majority and his colleagues had to figure out which parts of the spike protein to attach to which type of ferritin and how to link the two proteins together. It took months of trying more than 200 different combinations. By June of last year, the team found one version that succeeded where the others had failed. They then tested the experimental vaccine in mice, hamsters, and monkeys. The team also turned to less conventional animals for testing. Working with scientists in India, they injected horses with the vaccine to learn how strong the immune response was. And they collaborated with researchers at the University of Maryland to vaccinate sharks, which make special kinds of antibodies.
We saw the same thing over and over again, regardless of which animal species we were testing it in.
The vaccine produced a potent immune response against the original SARS-CoV-2 strain and 3 of its variants. The animals also developed antibodies against the 2002 SARS virus. The results are encouraging, but animals aren't people. The Army vaccine is now being tested in a small early-stage trial in humans. If it works and is safe, it could lay the foundation for a universal coronavirus vaccine.
The deadly coronaviruses like SARS-1, MERS, and now SARS-2 have all come from animal populations. And there's a strong expectation that this pattern is not going to end anytime soon. So we have to have a platform pre-positioned to anticipate the emergence of new coronaviruses.
But Majared says it's going to take sustained interest and investment from the government and pharma companies to get a vaccine like this ready in time for the next pandemic.
Our species has a tendency to get distracted. We have a very strong appetite for distraction, and when something is not in the spotlight, when it's not a crisis anymore, we tend to forget and move on to something else. So the biggest challenge is going to be maintaining focus on this next step of developing vaccines that anticipate pandemics.
Thanks for listening. For 60 Second Science, I'm Emily Mullen.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. From a very young age, we're encouraged to eat fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, many Americans are not getting the message. Dr. Seung-Hee Lee Kwan is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of eating enough fruits and vegetables. Welcome to the show, Seung-Hee.
Thank you for having me.
Seung-Hee, what is the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
The federal guidelines recommend that adults consume at least 1.5 cups to 2 cups of fruit and 2 to 3 cups of vegetables each day. This is for adults who get less than 30 minutes of physical activity a day. Adults who are more physically active need more calories and thus should be eating more fruits and vegetables. 1 cup is about 12 strawberries or 1 large tomato.
How many people consume the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
We found that very few adults are getting enough fruits and vegetables. Just 12% are eating the recommended amount of fruits, and less than 1 in 10 eat enough vegetables. And consumption is lower among men, young adults, and adults living in poverty.
Why is eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables so important?
Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help with 3 things. 1, it can reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and deaths, such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and even obesity. It can also add important nutrients that are commonly missing in Americans' diet. And it can help with weight management if adults consume fruits and vegetables instead of other calorie-dense foods.
How can we meet the recommended daily intake of fruits and vegetables?
Try to fill half of your plate with fruits or vegetables at each meal or every eating occasion. Making fruits and vegetables the focal point of your meal will help you meet your recommendations. For example, recent studies have shown that adults get most of their fruit during breakfast and snacks. So you can try adding berries to your morning oatmeal or grab a piece of fresh fruit as an afternoon snack. For vegetables, most adults eat them at dinner, so try adding more into your lunch by adding a side salad or packing a snack of baby carrots or grape tomatoes.
Are canned or frozen products just as good as fresh?
All forms of fruits and vegetables count towards meeting the recommendations. For the most health benefits, make sure that the fruits and vegetables you consume have a limited amount of salt, butter, sugar, or creamy sauces. When selecting canned fruits, choose the ones with lowest sugars. And for canned or frozen vegetables, choose those lower in sodium.
Where can listeners get more information about eating a healthy diet?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/nutrition or choosemyplate.gov.
Thanks, Seung-hee. I've been talking today with Seung-hee Lee Kwon about the importance of eating a healthy diet. Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and death and add important nutrients to your diet. Make sure you're eating enough. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
The eyes of Texas are upon you. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute, and that's the most famous line of the anthem of the University of Texas at Austin, the melody of which is the same as I've been working on the railroad. It's performed before every sporting event and at commencement. The anthem was first performed in Austin in 1903 by white students in blackface, a minstrel show depicting black Americans as dim-witted and happy in their position of servitude. Those shows continued until the mid-1960s. And the melody is derived from a minstrel tune about black laborers building levees across the South. That said, a university committee formed to study the song reported last spring that the song had, quote, no racist intent. Complaints about implicit, if not explicit, undertones of racism in this song are long-standing and now have come to a head in protests that have pitted large donors and administrators against student tour guides who have gone on strike over this, black legislators, and state activists. So far, the rich donors are winning. J.B. Bird, a university spokesman, recently confirmed that, quote, the eyes of Texas is and will remain our alma mater. So the fight goes on.
The eyes of Texas are upon you all the livelong day.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
And you cannot get away.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918.
That was the day Eugene V. Debs, leader of the Socialist Party, gave his legendary anti-war speech in Canton, Ohio. The speech, for which he would eventually be arrested, tried, and convicted under the Espionage Act. Though he avoided explicitly criticizing World War I or President Wilson, he made clear his views. He gave the speech at a park near the jail where Charles Baker, Charles Rutenberg, and Alfred Wagenknecht, three prominent socialists, were being held on Espionage Act-related charges. Debs noted, quote, "It is extremely dangerous to exercise the constitutional right of free speech in a country fighting to make democracy safe in the world." Debs was defiant. He unloaded his rage against the judicial system and the conviction of socialist leader Kate Richards O'Hare for her anti-war views. He railed against the suppression of Max Eastman's socialist press and the ongoing persecution of socialists Tom Mooney and William Billings. Debs briefly reviewed the history of wars in Europe and made the following observation, saying, quote, "The master class has always taught and trained you to believe it is your patriotic duty to go to war and to have yourselves slaughtered at their command. But in all the history of the world, you, the people, have never had a voice in declaring war. The working class, who fight all the battles, the working class, who make the supreme sacrifices, the working class, who freely shed their blood and furnish the corpses, have never yet had a voice in declaring war or making peace." For this, he was convicted of advocating disloyalty and draft resistance and sentenced to 10 years in prison. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2. Accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 53 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the mid to upper 90s, not as deadly hot as some parts of the west, and it looks like we might not get into triple digits, but the microclimates may push us there in those areas anyway. Looks like abundant sunshine throughout the day. Winds will be out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight. Lows in the mid-50s with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. Mainly sunny tomorrow with highs in the upper 80s, low 90s. Winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. The updated totals from the weekend for coronavirus infections in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have now risen to 11,459. The deceased confirmed remain at 146. Pollen is rated very high, and that's grass pollen, very high right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is good for the region at 23 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is very high at 9. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.22 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is a tropical 90%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 82 and partly cloudy. Paris is 91 and sunny. Rome is 80 degrees and fair. Kyiv is 80 degrees and fair. Kabul is 74 degrees with wind, and they say that that's fair. And, Hong Kong is 82 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 71 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 56 degrees with heavy rain. San Francisco, California is 62 degrees and fair. And New York
is a very pleasant 72 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Anonymous staff at the Associated Press bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Algeria's oldest party, previously thought to be on the wane, won the largest number of seats in weekend legislative elections, the country's electoral authority announced yesterday, Tuesday. The National Liberation Front, or FLN, secured 105 of 407 parliamentary seats, according to the provisional results. Independent candidates, including young people new to politics and many others who broke away from the FLN, placed second, winning a total of 78 seats. The voting Saturday was meant to open the way to a new Algeria, heralded by President Tebboune, to end an era of corruption and give the North African nation a new, younger face after a 2-decade reign of Bouteflika as chief of state. Bouteflika was forced to resign in 2019 under pressure from the Iraq pro-democracy protest movement. However, turnout was dismal, with Iraq protesters boycotting the elections, as did traditional opposition parties. The electoral chief, Mohamed Charfi, did not provide a turnout figure in his rundown of results, but media outlets calculating the number of voters among the 24 million eligible put the figure at 23%, a historic low.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Nicholas Vaumontoni of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A French court ordered home furnishings giant Ikea to pay some $1.3 million U.S. in fines and damages over a campaign to spy on union representatives, employees, and some very unhappy customers all over France. The two former Ikea France executives were convicted and fined over the scheme and given suspended prison sentences. Among the other 13 defendants in the high-profile trial, some were acquitted and others given suspended sentence. Adele Amara, a former Ikea employee who helped expose the wrongdoing, called the ruling a big step in defense of the citizen. It makes me glad that there is justice in France. The panel of judges at the Versailles court found that between 2009 and 2012, Ikea's French subsidiary used espionage to sift out troublemakers in the employee ranks and to profile squabbling customers. Ikea France was convicted of receiving personal data obtained through fraudulent means in a habitual way and ordered to pay $1 million in euros in fines and about 100,000 euros, which is about 121,225 bucks in damages. Trade unions accused Ikea France of collecting personal data by fraudulent means, notably via illegally obtained police files and illicitly disclosing personal information. Well, how nice. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.